Let's talk about blending Luminance colour pencils. As I'm sure you know, Luminance pencils are expensive, so I want to help you get the most you can out of them. Before I talk to you about any technique, I very briefly want to talk about paper. Using the right paper is so important when you're drawing with colour pencils. If you use the wrong paper, you won't get as good results. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this. As a general rule, I tend to use either Bristol board or sometimes I'll use some specialist colour pencil paper. I've put links in the description of what I'm using in this video. Alright, so what I want to do to begin with is draw a very simple colour gradient. So I want my colour gradient to go from yellow through to oranges and reds and then purple and blue on the right hand side. So I'm going to begin this with a yellow pencil. And what I'm initially wanting to be doing is putting down a base layer. That is putting down some sort of colour on the paper. Now there's a few things that I'm doing here. First off, and most importantly, I'm pressing very, very lightly. I don't want to be going in full force and just really scribbling with the pencil. I want to be building this up gradually in layers. So I'm pressing very lightly, and to help me with this, I'm holding the pencil a bit further back. I'm not holding it right by the tip. This stops me from being able to press too hard. Also note that I have a nice sharp pencil. This is going to help me control the pencil better and get more even coverage. And also, while thinking about adding more even coverage, I'm not just scribbling back and forth with the pencil, I'm working in little circular motions. This for me is the best way to get nice and smooth cover. The main thing we want to achieve here is have a very smooth gradient. So just working in these little circles and going over the same area a number of times. As I get towards the edge of where I want the yellow section to be, I am going to start going even lighter and putting less colour down towards the edge, and that's going to help me fade into the next colour. So on the very left hand side where I am at the end going to want it to be quite bright yellow, I can just go over that a few more times and less on the right where it's going to turn into orange. So where I'm moving on to the orange now, I'm doing a lot of the same things I did with the yellow. I'm still pressing very, very lightly, working in circular motions and holding the pencil quite far back. And as you can see, I've still got a nice sharp pencil. I do want to overlap the yellow and the orange a reasonable amount though. So note that I'm starting where there's blank paper and then I'm moving into the yellow section, just gradually getting lighter as I get more into that yellow section. Now the fade from one colour to another isn't going to be perfect at this point, but I do want to try and make it as smooth as I can. So I'm going so lightly as I get more towards the yellow section. And then once I'm happy with a base layer there, I can also do the same going to the right hand side, so fading out as I get over to where will be the red. So now I want to be doing exactly the same with the other three colours. And as you can see, there is quite an obvious line between each colour, but that's okay at this point. From here, I want to basically do exactly the same thing 2 more times. Now for me, with this blending, I'm doing it 2 more times. You may need to do more or you may need to do less. This is all about building up layers of pencil. It is one of the most important things of working with coloured pencil, is knowing how to build up layers. And by building up the colours slowly like this, you get a more vibrant, cleaner looking colour. And you also get more control. So I'm literally going back over the top in exactly the same way. And although I'm not pressing harder, every time I do this, it builds up more pigment on the paper and therefore makes a more vibrant colour. Once again, notice that where I'm doing the yellow, for example, I'm going over the yellow and also covering over the orange a little bit, and that's just going to help blend these colours together. I do want to fade out as I'm going over that orange though. Once I built up a decent amount of layers, what I want to do is something called burnishing. This is where you press harder and it completely fills in the tooth of the paper. Once you've burnished, you end up with a very glossy look, and you can put a little bit more pencil over the top, but not a lot. So that's what we want to do now. I'm going to start on the right hand side now because that's the darker side of the gradient. And as you can see, I'm still working in the circular motions. I'm holding the pencil much closer to the tip now though, so I can apply more pressure. And I'm starting off on the very right hand side where I just want it to be block blue, pressing nice and hard, and then as I get more towards the left where I'm going to want it to blend into the purple, I am once again lightening up my pressure. This is going to let me mix the blue with the purple. So I'm going to do the same with the purple pencil. So pressing very hard in the area that I want to be pure purple, and then lightening up the pressure into the blue area. And I'll also do the same going over to the red side, because I will be doing the same with the red pencil. And then what I'm left with here is there's a little gap between the blue and red still where I can see some little white spots of paper. So I want to be filling that in. I'm going to choose the lighter out of the two pencils now. So in this case, the blue is lighter than the purple. And I'm going to go back over the top, burnishing in this area. And when I'm pressing hard with the pencil here, you can still see the purple coming through, but it's kind of mixing the colours together. And then once I've done that, if there's any last tweaks I want to do, I can just lightly go over the top with the purple once again. So for the red, I'm starting off pressing nice and firmly once again, and then fading into the purple section. And I'll do the same with the red pencil going towards the orange. From here, I want to go back over the top of that and tidy up any of the purple, get the gradient from the purple into the red looking a bit tidier. And then I once again want to take the lighter of the two pencils, which would be the red here, and go back over the top, filling in any of the white spots of paper. So I'm going to do exactly the same for the orange and the yellow, and then by the end of this I have a nice smooth gradient of colour. Now it's all very well drawing a gradient, but how can we apply that to a real drawing? Let's have a look at how we can apply these techniques by drawing a baseball. Before we get started, if you want to draw this with me in real time, it is available on my Patreon along with loads of other real-time tutorials. Every drawing includes the full tutorial, real-time footage, the reference photos, sketch outlines, and all of the colour swatches to show you all of the colours that I use in each drawing. Check out the link in the description. So whenever I'm drawing anything realistic, I'm always blending from one colour into another. If I'm drawing a face, for example, if there's a shadow around the edge, it doesn't go from that dark shadow colour into a light colour of reflection with a really hard line. It gradually blends from one colour into another. And it's going to be the same with this ball. Let me show you. So I want to start this in exactly the same way as I did when I was drawing the gradient. I want to be putting down a very light covering of pencil. And just like before, different areas are going to need different colours. So for example, in this instance, the bulk of the ball is quite yellow, the stitching is more pinky red, and then there's some light areas that are more like a light grey. So I'm doing this in exactly the same way as I did with the gradient, working in little circular motions, pressing very, very lightly and holding the pencil quite far back. From here, I want to begin building up some of these gradients. So for example, the ball is much darker around the left-hand side and around the bottom, and then it gets lighter more towards the middle. So I'm going to use a darker colour, build up more of this colour around the edge, and then get much lighter and put less of the colour down as I get towards the lighter areas. And although it doesn't look very smooth at the moment, that's okay. It's exactly the same with the stitches, just they're a bit smaller. I want to be building up a gradient with a darker red now. So some areas of the stitches are darker than others, but I want the dark areas to fade into the light areas. So I can build up some gradient on top of these stitches to fade from what will be darker into what is lighter. Now what I find easiest when I'm drawing a picture is rather than building up all of the layers on the ball, for example, now and then burnishing and blending, I find it easier to build up the whole picture, get something down on the whole picture, and then blend it all at the end. So I'm going to do the same with the background, starting off with very light base layers, and then gradually building up other colours over the top of that where I can overlap from one colour into another. Some colours have quite a big overlap if I'm needing a very smooth colour. Some colours need a much shorter and more abrupt overlap if it changes very quickly from one colour into another. I think you can see the gradients that I'm creating most clearly where I start putting down the black. This picture does have an awful lot of black in it. And you can see that in some areas I have a really firm, solid, burnished area of black. And then I fade that out towards the bottom, for example, where in a little while I'll be able to put another colour to blend into that black. So let's focus on one particular part of this background. I'm going to look at this area down the bottom. So what I've already done is added in the very dark black areas down here, and then I've faded into what will be a light blue. I can then take a darker blue and burnish over the top of that black, but once again fade into what will be the light blue. And then finally I can take a light blue and just burnish over the top of the last areas along here, where at the moment I can see some white spots of paper. And it's basically a case of doing that over the whole of the drawing. So gradually building up some base layers, putting some more layers of colour over the top of that, particularly looking at what I want the blend to fade from and to. And then once I've built up enough layers, I can then take the lightest colour in each section and burnish over the top of what I have. So you want to be working in a number of light layers. You want to start off with a nice sharp pencil, work in circular motions and gradually build the colour up, making sure that you ease off as you're transitioning from one colour into another. Once you've built up enough layers, you can then burnish. That said, it's all very well getting the technique down, but as I mentioned at the very beginning, you also want to make sure you're using the right paper. If you want to learn more about which papers you should use with colour pencils, I have a whole video about it here. Until then, happy drawing guys, and I'll see you in the next one.